typically, it's very common that wind ordinances, whether they're zoning ordinances or police power ordinances, require compliance with the FAA. Typically, that's required. And if there's some showing that it's not, a project is not going to comply, typically that's resolved in the ordinance to avoid that sort of interference issue you're talking about. But that's one of many issues that municipalities struggle with and consider and debate when they're thinking of whether to adopt any police power, any wind ordinance, police power or otherwise.
So is the board here entertaining the notion of going ahead with some sort of police power ordinance, or?
I don't have information either way on that.
I'll go on a limb and say that's what we're investigating. Okay. But let me ask you, do you know what kinds of things are going to affect you? Is it simply, is it line of sight? Is it height? Is it?
There are a number of issues. I also don't want to go into hypotheticals because we're in the process of having that studied by engineering firms that specialize in RF interference issues. I'm just here to basically gather information, see where you're at now. I'm going to leave that to people above me to communicate with you at an appropriate time. But we are investigating that, but I don't want to speak to any hypotheticals right now because there are a number of concerns, but whether they're true issues or not, I don't know yet.
Are you having interference issues at this point now?
No, I mean,
You're concerned about the future.
Yeah, our concern is that our tower is 600 feet tall and the proposed windmills are somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 feet tall. And a lot of the, according to the FAA's website of proposed locations for wind in this area, a lot of them are between our tower and our main pickup locations for our head end for all the cable companies that carry our signal. So there is at least the potential of signal interference, not just with the local area, but also with all of the cable, because they take our signal off the air and then transmit it from there. So, and all of those are, most of those are in Toledo. The ones in Monroe County are south and east of here. So there's concern. We also do have a microwave link between here and our studio, which is in Toledo, and that is at the 300-foot level. So, there are a number of concerns with whether or not it's going to interfere with our signal, both getting it up here to the transmitter and then broadcasting it out. So.
Sure, and I would expect, if the board's going to move forward and consider any ordinance or not, I would expect that those are the types of concerns that the board would want to hear.
And our general manager and the chief engineer will be communicating with the board, but I'm not authorized to speak to any specifics today.
Bill French again. I just want to follow up on the FAA thing. They need to get permitted and they need to understand what's going on. What about MDOT's involvement in these things as far as this visitor passing over like Ogden Airport or small local runways and stuff like that? If their regulations regarding setbacks and things like that, that's something that has to be considered by the board as well.
It could be, and any municipality who's thinking of adopting a wind tower ordinance, Ogden or otherwise, could enlist ask MDOT for its input on regulations. Typically, in my experience, MDOT doesn't have a lot to say about it, and they kind of leave it to the local municipality, as long as there are other requirements addressed, like setbacks from roads, and MDOT's usually pretty comfortable. But that can change.
No, specifically about runways.
Yeah.
In other words,
that would probably be covered in the FAA issue. Any ordinance would address.
When we, Doug Drummering with Exelon Wind, before we can build a tower, we need permission from FAA on the height, but we also need permission from the Michigan Department of Tall Structures. So we need both a state level permit and a federal level permit.
Josh Van Camp. Can you talk maybe a little bit as far as what, if any, options the township has as they go forward with possibly, again, crafting a police powers ordinance in terms of a moratorium? Is that something that the township could ask for a moratorium on construction while a police powers ordinance was devised?
Yeah, good question. Generally, any municipality can adopt a moratorium at any time that it sees proper. And generally, the reason to adopt a moratorium is because the township wants to stop certain things. At one point, it was big box stores. We want to stop big box stores in our township until we evaluate the best place to locate them. And the U.S. Supreme Court has said moratoriums are fine as long as they are in reasonable duration. And 6 months was at least upheld by one court, but I think a longer time period under certain circumstances would be reasonable too. So generally speaking, to answer your question, moratorium can be adopted as a police power ordinance if there's good cause and if it's for a reasonable duration. Townships may decide to go with a moratorium or not based on what they see the public interest as well.
Dave Porter, I'm just trying to get some clarified here. Do we or do we not have a committee in place looking into some sort of a police policy? And if there is a committee, what is their directive?
I'm Russ Mead, and yes, we do have a committee in place. The directive was to establish impacts that may take place within the community, to report back to the board with the impacts along with potential options, what they would have, to help them to be able to develop or to go forward if they feel that police powers are needed. But as to identify certain impacts, things that might develop as the result of having the 500-foot tall turbines in here, whether it's related to health, safety, or welfare, whether it's related to liabilities. I mean, there's a lot of different things that really could be affected by having this type of an industrial facility within the area. So that's what the committee is looking at, and then going to the board with what we've identified, based on the information that we've gathered, and then provide them with recommendations on how they could proceed forward if they choose.
What steps then would the board have to take to adopt the moratorium?
The steps will be the same that they would take to adopt any police power ordinance. So they would have a draft prepared for them and then discuss it, deliberate, hash it out, and then decide.
Any more questions? If not, we're going to adjourn.